All right, welcome to Convocation. Just a couple of items of business before we start the live stream. So we have a couple weeks left. This is our second to last speaker for those who are in the class. Make sure that today's speaker is Jared Anderson. Jared's a chaplain for the Utah National Guard. He has a Master's of Arts degree in Religious Studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and he's the founder of the Olam Institute, which fosters interpersonal connection on shared religious commitments and values while maintaining each individual's distinctive identity. He is also on the board of directors for Humanists of Utah and Salt Lake Interfaith Roundtable. Chaplain Anderson has served those in need at Westminster College, the University of Utah, the Utah Department of Corrections, and Christofferson Veterans Home. He has previously taught religious studies at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Brigham Young University, the University of Utah, and Westminster College. And we welcome Jared Anderson.
As you see what we're going to be talking about. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about this Captain America uniform that I'm wearing. This is actually the first time that I'm wearing my dress uniform, and it took me 7 years of nonstop work to earn the right to wear this uniform. But that wasn't enough, because even though I paid for this uniform, I am not allowed to wear it unless I am told that I can. So for example, and it gets down to every single detail, my son and I just finished the Norwegian Ruck last weekend, where with 30-pound packs, we hiked 19 miles in 4 hours and 11 minutes. And because I did that, I get this little pin that I can put on this uniform, but not until a general tells me that I can put this pin on my uniform. And one thing that is really interesting about the military is the structure and the intensity of the military. You're thinking, like, how does all of this work? As a military chaplain, I work at the intersection of military and religion, which is pretty much the intersection of everything. When I taught at Westminster College, I would ask my students lots of things, but 2 questions to kind of help them feel the importance and the impact of the topic. The first one, and I'd love to hear from you in the question-answer session, so be thinking about it. Can you name any cultural institution more powerful than religion? When I taught world religions at Westminster, I would offer my students an A on the first day and say, I never need to see you again if you can just answer this one question. And then my second question was, if I want to be a professional good person, what job is that? Surely, if human goodness is so important, there needs to be a job, right? That's being a good person. Not a job that requires you to be a good person, but a professional good person. And I found it. It is a chaplain. Because in our culture, we have outsourced these questions of ethics and goodness and wellness to a large degree to religion. These are the existential questions. I was talking to a field artillery lieutenant a few weeks ago, and she said, it's kind of a cop-out that you just send everyone to the chaplain for everything. You know, like, oh, you're depressed? Talk to the chaplain. You're struggling with your relationship? Talk to the chaplain. You know, you have existential dread because of the patriarchy and capitalism? Talk to the chaplain. And I said, that's actually not really a cop-out, because what we are responsible for as chaplains is the entirety of human experience and beyond, you could say. Because what I do as a chaplain is I companion people in the entirety of existence. So after I taught religion for 13 years, I stacked an entire chaplain career into 7 years. So I simultaneously did 7 years of hospice, 7 years of prison, and 4 years of hospital chaplaincy. And so I have been able to serve and help people in their most intense environments. And for the past year, I've been able to serve for the Utah Army National Guard. I'll come back to that in just a minute. What does this have to do with Wonder Woman, Gandalf, and shirtless actors? My remarks are cosplay your better self. And this uniform that I had to get special permission to wear, I love the fact that religion gets away with lots of things, right? I mean, we have our social norms, but then we see someone dressed like Neo from the Matrix walking down the street, and if it's not Fanax, we're like, oh, they're just a priest. That's totally normal for them to be walking around in a black robe, you know, or walking in a Buddhist robe. I did a Jedi service and I just wore my Buddhist robe. But it's so interesting that the normal rules don't seem to pertain when it comes to religion. And it's similar with the military. Like, I am walking around looking like someone out of the Captain America movie, not coincidental, like these uniforms are based off of the World War II design. And I really love this moment that we're living in right now, where popular culture has gotten mainstream enough that we look at these actors that have gone from The Office to superheroes, and we think, yeah, like I could do something like that. So that's me on Halloween as Mr. Rogers. Badass Mr. Rogers is generally the vibe that I try to go for. But we see lots of different examples of people who are like, wow, I feel really inspired by what these other people have done. So on the left is my friend Brian Madison, who's also a minister. And he says in this, I did not reach my fitness goals to be like a shirtless bounty hunter, so I'm just going to do, something else. And it's not just about physical fitness, this idea of popular culture and its influence. There's a term that I think is the secret to motivation, and this is serious play. Who loves to work and study more than you like to play outside, read, play video games, do your hobbies? No one? What we do because we love to do it is called intrinsic motivation. These are things we do just because we want. We cannot wait to have a break, get through the semester, so we can do more of what we love. And one of the problems of human nature, the challenges of human nature, is that we are more motivated to play than to work. We are calibrated more for survival than thriving. That is why you feel the most motivated at the end of the semester, right? Whenever my students would say, oh, the semester is almost over, I'm like, oh, my friends, this is measured in effort, not time. And you know that half of the work is the last week of the semester, right? But I am fascinated by this bridge of serious play. And the military is an example of serious play. Fandom is an example of serious play. We're not going to go through this. And the main thing I want you to take away with from our time here is I want you to become a fan, not necessarily of the military, not necessarily of Star Wars, although we all should be fans of, Chris Hemsworth or Henry Cavill or whatever, but become a fan of you. And this is what I mean when I say cosplay your better self. Because when I am in this uniform, not only do people treat me different, but I feel different. I behave different. It is easier to be my better self when I am dressing as my better self. And all of us do this in more subtle ways, but I personally like working at the extremes of human nature, because the things that are true at the extremes are true all the time. It's just that when we are in the emergency room, or a physical fitness test, or a final exam, suddenly everything feels so clear. But it's always true. And I hope that you can be thinking about some ways that you can up your game when it comes to wellness. This is a character sheet that I'm working on. I'm not going to spend much time, but this represents the entirety of life goals and excellence and mastery. So in sum, what I want all of us to do is to show up to your well-designed life with proper form. And this is something that I've been working very diligently for the past 7 years to get better at. Because as I said, I worked relentlessly for the past 7 years to join the military. I went through my second divorce in 2016. This was a breakdown that became a breakthrough. That was kind of my dark night of the soul. And I started feeling this little nudge. Maybe you should join the Army. Maybe you should join the military. And I'm like, really? And I reached out to one of my friends, and I didn't want to do active duty. I knew that. And I reached out to a friend who was an active duty military chaplain. And I said, are there part-time military chaplains? I didn't even know. And he said, Jared, not only are there part-time military chaplains, there are part-time military special forces chaplains. There are Green Berets in the National Guard. I'm like, cool. And that was my target. And then the Army said no, and no, and no, and no, again and again and again. And so in 2017, I tried and I was rejected. In 2018, 2019, I kept working on civilian chaplaincy, doing other training. In 2019, I walked into the Joint Force headquarters of the Utah Army National Guard, where I now work full-time. I went to a recruiter who's now one of my friends, and I said, I just want to serve. I want to do anything. And he said, you are old. I was 41 at the time. And I said, put me anywhere. And so I tried for another few years to get in. And then 2020, 2021, I kept applying. And finally, in 2022, I went through the whole process of applying for the Army Reserves. They said no. The two reasons why the Army said no is because I was blind and I'm a humanist. We can come back around to that as well. I got eye surgery. In 2020, my recruiting sergeant said, thank you for your desire to serve, but you're blind. I said a swear word, and I'm going to do it anyway. So I got eye surgery the next month, waited 6 more months, reapplied, finished divinity school, and I finally was able to commission as an officer in the Utah Army National Guard last year. And here I am now. And the reason I share my story is because I want to share with each of you some things that I have learned from the best of the military. And in a word, the military is about readiness. I have spent the past 7 years helping people in their most intense moments. And I like to say that fortitude is the mother of all virtues, because if we do not have the mental and emotional endurance to handle the difficult reality, we cannot handle anything else. One uncomfortable truth that all of us know eventually, a lot of you still have the illusion of immortality. My younger brother is quadriplegic. He broke his neck when he was 15. So he has a different experience. All of us are forever one senseless moment away from disaster, like the sheep who are crossing the road, which is one on my way here. But all of us are one moment away from facing the hardest thing that we never wanted to confront. And the military is probably the best organization to say, you're going to get ready. You know, like whatever comes, whenever it comes, whether it's World War III or a national disaster, you are going to be ready now. And all of us, like, we have to trick ourselves into being our better selves. And all of us can engage in this serious play, these rigorous systems that help us be our better selves. So I'm going to suggest a pivot. Military recruiting is like, hey, do you want to join the military? No? Okay. You do? You're not ready anyway. Okay. What I'm proposing is let the military join you. So what in the military can you draw from? And the most important thing that I want to talk about is mental and spiritual readiness. So you may or may not resonate with the Army values. I mean, I hope you do. Loyalty, duty, respect, selfless service, honor, integrity, and personal, courage. Now, the thing is, one thing I've learned is that the right thing to do is almost always adjacent to the thing that people usually do, right? It's like, I mean, kind of, but not like that. One of the most important things I have learned is that it is not that younger Americans don't want to serve. It's that you want something worthy to serve. And that the institutions in our world today are not worthy of you for the most part. But what we can do is we can find our values, we can find those connection points, we can find a way to connect to our sense of purpose. And being a chaplain is a cheat code in the video game of life for so many reasons. But one of the things that I most value about being a chaplain is that no matter how messed up a system is, no matter how corrupt a system is, my job as a chaplain, besides basically being a service animal that jumps out of airplanes, is to be good. At prison, be good. In the military, be good. My job is to be the ethical advisor to command and to preach peace and wellness in an institution of war. Isn't that fascinating? So I'm going to talk about these areas of readiness in holistic health and fitness. Physical readiness. So I was sworn in on May 17th, 2023. I got a text from the chaplain in Canada I work with where he said, we are drilling this weekend. I asked my supervising chaplain, can I go? And he said, you are sworn in. I scrambled together a uniform. I took my son's Air Force name tape. I Sharpied it black. And the first thing I did was this. It is called the ACFT, the Army Combat Fitness Test. And it is a 3-time deadlift, then a standing power throw, then hand release push-ups, then sprint drag carry, which is 50 meters times 5 sprint, drag a 90-pound sled, lateral sprint, kettlebell carry, sprint, plank, 2-mile run. That's the first thing I did. That was my welcome to the military. Nutritional readiness. On the right is how I like to cook. On the left, a lot of you may know this is an MRE, interesting food science. Sleep readiness. All of you can use ritual in order to get healthier. And the military knows, the military is such an interesting paradox, because on one hand, it messes you up, and on the other hand, it trains you so you can achieve the limits of human potential. My summary of both religion and the military is incomparable good at inexcusable cost. And so one thing I'm obsessed with that I'm working on with my nonprofit and my side, like the character sheet, is, okay, Army, but what if it was good? What if we could take the power of something like the Department of Defense and use it to sustain well-being and improve civilization? What a world that would be. And so in this moment, we all have the opportunity to take those little bits, those doses of the military on your terms, or a little bit better than your terms. So for example, with my sleep training, I meditate at least 10 minutes a day. 10 to 20 minutes will rewire your brain. It helps you heal faster. It will rewire your nervous system. So what I do is I do 10 minutes of mindfulness meditation. I put one hand on my lower stomach, one hand on my chest, and I just breathe and be. Right when I wake up, in bed, super comfortable, a little bit of extra time, and this will save your life. This will rewire your brain. And I also listen to the same 2 songs before bed every night. One is A Blessing from The Leftovers, a weird and wonderful show, and the other is Sleeping at Last, Saturn. So this is sleep, things we can do. Mental readiness, and this is where I want to slow down just a bit. Our mindset is a matter of life and death. And this is my job as a chaplain, as I have worked in the military, in hospitals, in emergency rooms, in ICUs. I have helped hundreds of people die. There was a moment in the ICU where I felt like I was part of a television show where the estranged daughter of a dying 80-something woman who had already had CPR for 4 times in a day. Do not do CPR to 80-year-olds. It's just bad. And I said to this daughter, I was holding her hand, I said, "You cannot save your mother, but you can save her suffering." And she said, "Okay, I get it." I walked into the room and I said, "Stop CPR." I have helped dozens of families bring peace to their loved ones. And so one thing that I've learned, and so currently my full-time job at the Utah Army National Guard is I am the Risk Reduction Coordinator, Suicide Prevention, Substance Abuse Prevention. Because one of the most important things that I have learned is that each of you are the greatest opponent you will ever encounter. Suicide deaths are dozens of times higher in both military and law enforcement than combat deaths. Or, death in action is much less common than suicide. And again, what is extreme in these moments, and I lived over a decade with suicidal ideation. What is true in these extremes is true all the time. And so we can learn these practices of mental and spiritual readiness. And it will not only save your life, but it will improve the quality of your life day to day. So mental readiness is character, which is who you are. It's really funny that you don't know who you are until you ask yourself, or until life asks you, and then you find out. And there's the idea of who you are, and then there's the reality of who you are. Look at your patterns. Look at how you spend your time. Ask the people who know you, and they may say something different about who you are. Your behavior is the expression of who you are. Resilience is our ability to adapt, to keep going, to metabolize the difficult things in life and metabolize it into strength and growth. That's one of my superhero powers, is I can metabolize trauma, pain, and challenge into growth very, very well. My brain is an efficiency engine. Cognitive skill is our ability to take information and to put it into action. Social acuity, being a good team member, emotional intelligence, communication skills. Spiritual readiness. So spirituality, as I said, it took 7 years for me to become a military chaplain because I am a humanist chaplain. And what is a humanist, you may ask, or not? But a humanist is every one of you, because being a humanist is having a human-centered approach to life. Academia is very humanist. Banks are humanist. Economics is humanist. Politics is humanist. Arts is humanist. Everything is humanist except religion, which is the only aspect of human culture that has convinced humans that it's not an aspect of human culture. But I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about spirituality. Lisa Miller wrote The Awakened Brain. She also did the research behind spiritual readiness. Spiritual readiness is your sense of purpose, meaning, values, connection. Spirituality has an 85% protectiveness factor against depression and self-harm. Spirituality is literally a miracle pill. But the challenge of spirituality is that because it isn't the same thing as going to church, not that anyone would know that here in Utah, right? It's confusing because you can lack spirituality by not going to church, and you can lack spirituality by going to church. One of my friends runs the organization, the Military Association for Atheists and Freethinkers, and he has been trying to get humanist chaplains into the military for 20 years. And the frustrating, crazy-making thing is that spiritual readiness is humanist. The actual policy says this is for all of us. It is part of your human heritage to be connected to something bigger than you. We are the universe experiencing itself. Life is sacred. And how do you connect to that? That is your quest, and that is your question. So lifting the hood of spirituality, spirituality is about your values, what gives you a sense of meaning, what connects you to the sense of transcendence. Was anyone able to see the eclipse in any way, shape, or form? I mean, pictures, at least, I hope. I mean, really cool. Especially, this is one way that we're spoiled in Utah. There are all these experiences where we're just like, wow. How amazing it is just to exist. The activist Rabbi Heschel said, just to live is holy, just to be is a blessing. What inspires you, what connects you, what motivates you, these are spirituality. So in conclusion, and then I want to open it up to discussion, the purpose of our time here is I want all of you, as I said, you are the greatest opponent that you will ever encounter. You are also the greatest ally that you will ever encounter. I have found that a lot of us, so everything we do is for a reason. It can be a really messed up, dysfunctional reason, but there is a reason for everything that we do. And one thing that I've learned is we have our normal way of engaging with life, the things that we want. As a man, I have learned that much of what I'm doing is a functional temper tantrum. That was hard to face and to realize, as someone with a subsidized existence and entitlement, it was really something to compensate for that. So one thing I've learned is that we have our engagement, and then that's like a fuel bucket. Then we have an extra fuel bucket that we save for resistance and avoidance and blaming and temper tantrums, but that's also fuel. So at any given point, you can be like, oh, I can use my man-baby temper tantrum fuel to just like clean the house and do my laundry and do what I'm supposed to be doing, you know? So this is another takeaway, is all of you have access to strength and resources more than you're aware of and more than you are engaging with. And so similar to the military, like for all of us, life will demand of each of you more than you ever thought you had to give. And so what we can do, what we can opt into, not do the things you want, but do the things you are glad to have done, and to train yourself to live at that higher level. Thank you.
All right, so we have about 15 minutes for questions, and while the TAs come around, maybe think up of some ideas and raise your hand when you think of a question to ask.
Yeah.
What are the similarities between chaplains and other religious leaders?
I love that you asked that question, because chaplains serve as a bridge. And there was a soldier last drill who's like, my brother's a missionary, and he wants to keep doing the same thing and become a chaplain. I'm like, whoa, no. A chaplain is the opposite of a missionary. Because so a minister or a religious leader is like a poster child for the ideal version of that religion, right? Whether it's a bishop or a pastor or whatever, it's like, I want to be like them. You know, I want people you admire in your faith community, they're like the best members of their faith community, right? Like the Dalai Lama is a very famous Buddhist leader. Chaplains, our own spirituality becomes transparent. It just disappears, because my job is to meet you at your level of spirituality. So as a chaplain, like it was funny, because again, as a humanist, I was meeting with a soldier and he's like, humanist chaplain, like, isn't that cheating? Because like, I'm an agnostic. I have no particular spiritual beliefs. And people ask me, like, how are you a chaplain? I'm like, really bloody well, because I don't have any agenda or secret belief about what works for you. So as a chaplain, it is my job. I have served Muslims, Catholics, atheists, you know, like everyone. So as a chaplain, our job is in the most difficult moments of life and also the boring, ordinary, normal. There are chaplains everywhere. NASCAR has chaplains, Disneyland has chaplains, airports have chaplains. I mean, they're everywhere. It's the coolest job you've never heard of. And so again, the job of a chaplain is to companion you as you are existing. It's amazing. So as a spiritual leader, I as a chaplain am your guide and friend and help and facilitator as you are wrestling with the deepest questions of existence. Does that answer your question? And also just like hang out and whatever. While we're waiting, the difference between chaplains and therapists or social workers is that we are whole person focused. And therapists, so social workers will connect you to external resources, therapists will help you figure out specific problems, and chaplains, we deal with you as the whole person in the whole life experience and help you access your internal resources. So like existential questions is a fancy way of putting it. Yeah.
Is this on? Okay, would you describe to be humanist as a theology or like a belief system?
Love it. I love that question. So I have a Master of Divinity, which is hilarious, but it's not made up any more than anything else. And I had a class in constructive theology, so I went through all of divinity school as a humanist. And so theology is a word that describes this system of understanding of the fundamental reality, right? And so there can be humanist theology, and so I wrote my own humanist theology. So for example, in my theology paper, it's like, what are we saved from and what are we saved to? And so my answer was, humans are profoundly disappointing and systems are profoundly corrupt. And so we need to be motivated, incentivized, and empowered to be our better selves. And so for me, humanist salvation is accessing our better selves through better systems. But I love that. So it's a worldview, but there are theological implications of that worldview. Definitely a $10 question. It's awesome. It takes a week to digest 30 minutes with me, so it'll come. And I'll make sure that everyone can get a hold of me. Like, I'd love to send out an email or something where someone can like reply, and I'll do that. But
are there any like experiences that you feel comfortable sharing to maybe give us more of a vision of, I don't know, a story that really is, an experience that's really stood out to you while working with people, whether it is in the correctional facility or with the National Guard, that could maybe give us more of a tangible understanding of what chaplains do in general?
yeah, so one of the most memorable stories, so the way that I anchor myself in the work that I do is I say it's true whether or not I'm looking, right? People are like, how can you handle such difficult, heavy things? I'm at Primary Children's Hospital at the moment, so I literally deal with dying babies and children, and that's my side job, like my side job. One of the most complex cases that I ever dealt with was a patient who had a stroke. And for 2 days, he was wedged between his mattress and the wall in the basement of his daughter's home, dying. Well, his daughter was just having her weekend. And I helped the family process that. It's called moral injury, where we are hurt not so much by what happens to us, but what we see, what we're a part of, and what we do, whether or not we're aware of that. And so the way that I talked to this daughter, so her dad died. Her dad died with her hypothetically knowing that she could have saved him for over 2 days, right? Except she couldn't, right? And we get into this coulda, woulda, shoulda. And I have talked to a lot of prisoners. And in a word, as a chaplain, I help people move to acceptance and to move from like, why me to what now, by accessing things like values and, this sense of narrative congruence. So one thing that I said to this daughter is I said, like, I can only imagine like how haunting it is, to be sitting by your dad in the ICU with, knowing that he suffered for these 2 days as you were just going about your life. But the fact is, your relationship with your dad was such that not talking to him was part of your normal. And that is what it is. In a word, the military mindset is stoicism. And Buddhism also has this idea of any resistance is a waste of energy. And my dad and older brother were bipolar schizoaffective. And I was raised by a narcissistic, sociopathic military police officer. My first memory is being handcuffed to my crib. And so in order to just be okay, I have had to develop an extreme level of my own like resilience and wellness practices. And so one thing that I have done is I have removed almost all resistance from my own process to the point where I don't even say I'm sorry. Like, I apologize, but when people are like, oh, I'm really sorry that's happening, I'm like, I'm not. That is a waste of energy. It's like, this is what it is. Like an emergency room, it's like, okay, this is what's happening. And my job as a chaplain, again, is to help people as quickly as possible have that cognitive reframing is the fancy way of putting it, but having that mindset shift. We call this an epiphany. All of us have had this experience, right? Where your situation doesn't necessarily change, but you have this aha moment that makes it feel different. And the most important thing that I've learned in my work is that all of us have access to these aha moments. So like really, I mean, I hope that helps give a sense. Another thing that is very meaningful for me is to working in the ICU, helping family members take their loved ones off life support. And this is why the idea of the thing versus the reality of the thing is like my fundamental lens. Also systems theory, like we are part of big, complex clusters. And so we need to move with proper form within those complex systems of injustice and oppression, and also just complexity. And so the way that we think of the way that we do things, it is a matter of life and death. And it's not just in our heads. Really quick, one of my favorite studies is they were working with a bunch of hotel housekeepers. Not a very glamorous job, right? You know, cleaning up in a hotel. And only half of them, they said, did you know that your job qualifies as an exercise regimen? Only that half lost weight and got healthier. Because the way that we think about what we are doing, down to our breath, changes the way our bodies respond. And so as a chaplain, so for example, in the ICU, what you're thinking, the idea of the thing is, oh, I want to save my loved one, right? Whereas the reality is, that's not a realistic option. The only thing you're actually doing is increasing and prolonging their suffering. And so the sooner we can have that fortitude to accept reality as it is, and then constructively engage with reality, you've won the game of life. Like, it's really powerful.
Hello? Oh. How do you handle grief?
I love that question. One, I'm a professional sad person. Everyone's seen Avengers, I hope. Good full circle. Remember that moment in the first Avengers where Captain America says, time to get angry, time to get angry to Bruce Banner. Does anyone remember what Bruce Banner's line was? He says, that's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry. So this is part of my secret, is I'm always grieving. So one of the purposes of life, besides to live it, like as a humanist, I believe in life before death. We can talk about that some other time. The purpose of life is to facilitate the flow of feelings and experiences through our body and make the most of them. I'm going to tell you a ritual that will extend your life. I have to talk about a shower for a minute, if that's okay. It's like when you're in the shower, taking a shower is one of the most powerful things that we do. It's a very powerful ritual. And as you're in the shower, check in with what you're feeling. Is it grief? Is it relief? Is it anxiety? And say, this grief is flowing through my body like this water. This water is my grief going down the drain. Isn't that beautiful? And your body just will feel better. Even more than a chaplain, I'm a wellness architect. My very favorite interventions are the ones you don't need to understand and you don't need to agree with, they just work. So how do I handle grief? I journal compulsively is one of them, but my 3 favorite assessment questions are, what is it like to be you? What do you want to do about it? What do you need? Isn't that beautiful? I call my approach to life coaching minimal wellness, because one of the paradoxes of this like influencer culture and these like life coaches is like, well, the reason you're depressed is because you aren't doing yoga before your green smoothie and like visiting Bali on a paid sponsorship. You know, instead, in my wellness work, I like asking, what's the least you can do? What is the least you can do to feel better? What is the least you can do? Like little video games on my phone saved my life when I was suicidal. I mean, another, again, different topic. Like I am made of resilience, but also my baseline is excruciating. Like being conscious just hurts. And so I've had to develop rigorous practices to just to function. And so I have had to develop rigorous habits, including journaling and meditating and exercise and things like that, just to feel okay day to day. And so you put me in an extreme environment where I'm helping people on the edge of life and death, and I feel calm. I'm plugged in. Like I'm made for it. And so the way that applies to everyone is, again, like, what is it like to be you? I mean, I have heard of people who are like human golden retrievers who are happy all the time. I mean, I don't really resonate. But like, what is it like to be you? What do you want to do with it? And what is your way to manage and to even thrive with that? But one reason is like, don't resist it. Let everything flow through you. And that is the paradox, is that it's very similar to jumping in a cold, pool or something like childbirth. If you don't resist, it actually decreases the pain. So just like leaning fully into the thing, including grief, helps it metabolize through us faster. So I don't really have a choice, is one answer.
I think that was a good question to end on. And so if we could, I know that Chaplain Anderson will be here and happy to talk to anybody if they want to come right after we dismiss. So let's give a last round of applause for Jared Anderson.
Yep. And being here, and again, I'm grateful that this will be made available, and so you can share it and talk about it. And I'm ridiculously accessible, and so like any one of you that wants to reach out and say, let's talk about the deepest existential questions of life, I'm definitely here for it.